If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41. At that moment, the scene fell into silence, with shock evident in everyone's eyes. Eddie was equally unsettled. After obtaining Venom, even though he hadn't thought much about it, deep down, he felt special until he encountered this person. Unlike Venom's abilities, both the blue beam and the method of deflecting bullets seemed incredibly powerful. The stranger didn't do much, he merely raised his hand and resolved everything. It was as if an overwhelming aura emanated from him, suffocating everyone, making any resistance seem futile. Thomas and the others panted heavily, cold sweat dripping from their foreheads, feeling the same pressure. At the Life Foundation, Drake and the others were glued to the screen, their emotions in turmoil. A more perfect being than a human symbiote hybrid? This astonishing aura and power seemed godlike. The venom inside Eddie took a long time to recover from the disbelief. Such a powerful host? This ability to effortlessly handle everything, how could this be human? His other half had bonded with such a being? Even though he didn't want to, Venom couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. While they were in shock, Syd's venom recovered as the sonic device was destroyed. The black liquid slowly wriggled out of Syd's right hand. I told you, you'd regret it. Venom's small face twisted into a slightly sinister smile. He laughed, I didn't give him power, he gave me power. You can't even imagine the feeling, the addictive sensation. Turning to Thomas and the others, he cackled, Crawl, you worms, you can't win. You can't fathom my host's power. Despite being stunned by the blue beam and bullet deflection, Venom was now basking in borrowed glory. At the Life Foundation, Drake hesitated for a moment before ordering through the communicator, open fire. Thomas and the guards, suppressing their fear, gritted their teeth and raised their guns. Bang! 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 Silver bullets spun and whistled towards their target. Then, something even more suffocating happened. The man in black didn't even raise his hand this time, standing quietly in place. The bullets aimed at him suddenly reversed direction, reflecting back at the shooters. Rebound shield experience +1. Rebound shield experience +1. Ah! Screams echoed continuously. The more bullets they fired, the worse their plight, with some even getting shot in the heart by the reflected bullets, collapsing in convulsions. Even those lightly injured were bleeding profusely, showing signs of blood loss. At that moment, the man in black exuded an even more suffocating presence, filling everyone with despair. Not only were the bullets ineffective, but the opponent didn't even move to neutralize them. They had never felt such suffocation or such an invincible presence. Even Venom on Eddie was wide-eyed and open-mouthed, clearly shocked by the scene. Syd's venom, despite his own shock, mocked, Ha! Abandoned half, see? This is the power of my great host. You! Venom on Eddie felt both anger and jealousy. At that moment, sirens were heard in the distance, indicating someone had called the police. Hearing the sirens, the mysterious man in black moved slightly, starting to leave. Seeing him leave, Eddie couldn't help but shout, Who are you? The man in black turned to look at him, and in the shadow of the hood, a pair of dazzling golden eyes met his. For a moment, Eddie felt as if he was looking into the eyes of a god. When he came to his senses, the mysterious man had already walked away, leaving Venom's voice echoing distantly. We will meet again. Look forward to it. The mysterious figure gradually disappeared from sight. At that moment, a sound from nearby caught Eddie's attention. Before he could react, the Venom suit enveloped him again. A bullet embedded itself into the suit. Humans! Venom roared angrily and, under the horrified gazes of Thomas and the others, charged at them. Crunch, crunch. A series of brain-crunching sounds followed. When everything settled, only a pile of corpses remained. At the Life Foundation, Drake and his team, watching the battle, were both panicked and furious. Drake slammed his fist on the table, his face filled with frustration. Though it was Eddie who killed most of his men, the mysterious figure in black lingered in his mind. Far from the battlefield, Eddie and Venom were having a conversation. Who is he? Eddie wondered aloud. He searched his memories, feeling a vague familiarity but unable to recall. Humph, Eddie, why bother? My other half said we'd meet again. You'll find out then. Venom taunted. Eddie, looking at Venom's grim visage, asked, What are you? I am Venom. Venom circled Eddie, his voice hoarse. Your body belongs to me, You just bit off someone's head. I need to replenish my energy. Listen carefully, Eddie. You didn't find us, we found you. You're like my steed. Venom declared ownership. Eddie retorted while walking, like a parasite. Your attitude towards me is very different from your other half's towards that guy in black. He seemed very attentive, like a shepherd dog. Eddie spoke bluntly. Venom. Suddenly, he noticed something. Parasite? Eddie. Venom roared. Their bickering continued. Where are you taking me? We're going to find Drake's rocket. You know this person. How do you know I know him? I know everything, Eddie. Really? I know all about you. I'm in your head. When you're hungry, will you eat people again? Very likely. Oh my god. We came to Earth for food. Cooperate, and you'll live. That's my condition. Eddie felt conflicted. At that moment, his phone rang. Eddie looked at the caller ID, it was a colleague. Answering, a female voice demanded, Eddie, we've been waiting for you at the Life Foundation for a long time. Where are you? Eddie replied awkwardly, let me explain. Meanwhile, the man in black Eddie had seen was walking through a secluded alley. Chapter 42. In a secluded alley, Venom formed a small head, its face full of confusion. Syd, why are we leaving like this? Venom was puzzled. Weren't they supposed to stop Drake from launching the rocket to bring back the symbiotes? Syd glanced at Venom and said casually, I trust Eddie. He should be able to stop Drake. Of course, this was just an excuse. Syd simply believed that launching the rocket would take some time. Instead of spending that time trying to stop it, he thought it was better to grow stronger. If he could upgrade all the powers of the snake to their maximum, the so-called symbiote meteorite would be a trivial matter for him. Shaking his head, Syd added, and Earth is deep water, full of things and people beyond your imagination. Some things will be dealt with by others, we just need to watch. Deep water. Venom's small face was full of confusion, not understanding. Wasn't it just Earth? How deep could it be? The doubt flashed through his mind, but then he focused on what had just happened. His face lit up with excitement. Syd, you were amazing just now. They were all terrified of you. You didn't see the look on my foolish other half's face, it was priceless. Venom's face turned to surprise, speaking incredulously, Syd, the blue energy you fired and the way you deflected the bullets, are those your superpowers? He remembered the two assassins from earlier. Back then, his host had also displayed other superpowers. You have so many abilities. Venom was incredulous. Having fully bonded with several humans, he knew from their memories that this host seemed a bit off. Too strong, almost abnormal? Shaking his small black head, Venom didn't dwell on it, thinking the host was just a bit unusual. Syd, where are we going now? Venom asked curiously. Let's leave this area first. I told you before that I'm being hunted. As he spoke, Syd quickly left the area. Along the way, beams of sunlight touched him. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Unlock progress 80%. Energy points, 298. Syd glanced at the panel. There were still many energy points needed to reach 85%. Half an hour later, Syd gradually stopped. With Venom looking confused, he began practicing Black Particle. Black Particle experience +1. Black Particle experience +1. Soon, it was evening. Ability, Black Particle, 266/500, Level 2. Looking at the panel data, Syd sighed in relief. He had spent almost the entire day to reach this level. By tomorrow evening, it should be ready to upgrade. If not for maintaining full energy, he could have increased the data even more. Then, he left the area and, with Venom's assistance, found a secluded spot to sleep. With Venom sensing danger and his internal photon energy detecting anomalies, he wasn't too worried. The next morning. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. In a daze, Syd was awakened by the prompt sound. He glanced at the panel. Energy points, 355. After getting up, he continued practicing Black Particle with Venom still looking confused. Time flew by, and soon it was evening. A prompt sounded in his mind. Ability, Black Particle, 0/1000, level 3. Looking at the refreshed data on the panel and feeling the sudden change in his body, Syd's mood lifted. What happened? Venom was instantly alert, noticing a change in Syd's body but not understanding what had changed. He was very puzzled. Syd didn't respond immediately, quietly sensing the sudden changes within. Sunlight continuously absorbed, filling the void of photon energy. When his photon energy was full, Syd silently sensed the changes. With Black Particle at level 3, he found that his energy could now perform more than 70 level 2 abilities. It had almost doubled. Syd raised his hand and, under Venom's astonished gaze, fired a level 3 Black Particle at the ground. Black Particle experience +1. Black ripples appeared on his finger, followed by a fist-sized black particle. With a swoosh, the particle shot towards the ground. In the next second, a fist-sized, 24-meter-deep hole appeared on the ground. Venom was shocked. Syd's lips curled into a slight smile. Not bad, the power has increased significantly. If previously, hitting a person with black particle only had a slim chance of survival with prompt medical treatment, now with a fist-sized black particle, survival chances were minimal. Hitting the limbs might be survivable, but hitting the torso or head was almost certainly fatal. After all, no one could survive with a fist-sized hole in their chest, abdomen, or head. Unless they had Wolverine's healing factor. But how many people in this world had healing abilities? In short, Black Particle had become a highly lethal ability, ensuring that targets didn't need a follow-up hit, unlike before. Before, not finishing off the target could mean they survived, but finishing them off wasted energy, which was disadvantageous against multiple enemies. But, sensing his photon energy consumption, Syd shook his head, feeling a bit helpless. That single attack had consumed a significant portion of his photon energy. Roughly estimating, he could perform about 30 level 3 black particles. It seems I'll have to deal with energy shortages for a while. Unless he acquired more abilities or upgraded more abilities to increase his photon energy. Syd shook his head helplessly. After testing Black Particle, he was about to sense the impact of increased photon energy on photon sunshine when Venom's voice interrupted. Syd, did I see it wrong? How did your release get so much bigger? The range has also increased a lot. Venom found it unbelievable, almost thinking it was an illusion. Can practice increase so much? He didn't understand. Ahem, you saw wrong, Syd coughed lightly, speaking nonchalantly. Really? Venom's black face was full of confusion. Taking advantage of Venom's confusion, Syd looked up at the sky. The sun was almost setting, the weak sunlight tinting the sky red. In the next second, his photon energy decreased. Chapter 43. Suddenly, within a range of about 25 meters, the rosy sunlight slightly distorted. Syd quickly stopped his actions to prevent his photon energy from being depleted. While absorbing the faint sunlight to replenish the missing energy, Syd thought, only increased by about 5 meters. Shaking his head, he felt a bit disappointed. The increase was rather ordinary, far from what he had expected. He had hoped for an increase of 40 to 50 meters, but that was clearly too much to ask. After all, this was just a slight improvement in the quality of his photon energy, coupled with an increase in the total amount of energy, resulting in a small expansion of the range. It seems that to truly increase the range, I need to upgrade Sunshine to level 3. Syd shook his head, realizing he had to take it slow. However, other abilities reaching level 3 also brought significant improvements, so it wasn't all bad. Continuously enhancing them would also be a considerable boost. What's next to upgrade? Sunshine. As he pondered, Venom was left in a daze. Was it my imagination, or did the sunlight just distort on a large scale? Venom said in amazement. Syd replied casually, really? Maybe it was just your imagination. Imagination? Venom was stunned. Could it really have been a hallucination? Did Syd not notice anything? At that moment, Venom doubted whether his perception was failing him. First, Syd's attacks had become significantly larger, then he sensed the sunlight distorting. Venom was left bewildered. Ahem. Syd cleared his throat and focused on choosing the next ability to upgrade. Next, I'll choose Rebound Shield. Syd had thought it through. While Sunshine was crucial, it required too much energy and time to upgrade, time that could be used to enhance several other abilities to level 3. Most importantly, he currently lacked defensive capabilities, having plenty of offensive abilities but few defensive ones. He might get taken down by a surprise attack if he wasn't careful. Rebound shield was quite useful, at least against modern bullets. Moreover, it could also block energy attacks, although he hadn't had the chance to test that yet. Upgrading this ability to level 3 would significantly expand its defensive range, so he wouldn't need to activate 2 rebound shields simultaneously in combat. Glancing at the sky and sensing the recovering photon energy within him, Syd didn't continue practicing but instead left the area. As the sun set and the moon rose, then the moon set and the sun rose again. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Nothing unexpected happened, and Syd passed the night safely. Early the next morning, he resumed practicing his abilities. Rebound shield experience +1. Rebound shield experience +1. By evening. Ability, Rebound shield, 241/500, level 2. Time flew by, and another day passed. After using up some of his internal energy, he successfully upgraded Rebound shield to level 3 before sunset. The prompt sounded. Ability, Rebound shield, 0/1000, level 3. Sensing the changes in his body, Syd smiled. Rebound shield experience +1. As he activated Rebound shield, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. The range of Rebound shield had indeed increased significantly. Upon activation, it covered his entire front. This meant that as long as he was careful with his sides and timely in activating Rebound shield, his defense was essentially secure. Of course, this was assuming his energy didn't run out. If it did, even he could be overwhelmed. At that moment, he felt much more confident. Meanwhile, since the activation of Rebound shield was quite subtle, Venom didn't notice much. He just looked on in bewilderment as Syd practiced, not understanding the purpose of it all. During this time, Venom kept urging him to take action, complaining about not having bitten anyone in a while. Syd, feeling helpless, ignored Venom's requests and focused on Sunshine. Logically, he should be upgrading other abilities first, but he couldn't help himself. Compared to Sunshine, the improvement of other abilities felt insignificant. With Black Particle for attack and Rebound shield for defense, he was pretty well covered now. With anticipation, he awaited the next morning. Night fell, and hours passed. With Venom's keen senses, he spent another safe night undisturbed. As the sky began to lighten. Looking at the overcast, cloud-covered sky, Syd frowned slightly. Photon energy +1. Although he was still absorbing sunlight, the rate had drastically decreased. Unlucky. Syd sighed. But it was understandable, it had been sunny for several days. A rainy day was bound to come eventually. Photon energy +1. If only I could fly above the clouds. Syd shook his head, feeling a growing desire for flight. He wondered if the ability unlocked at 85% progress would be floating or flying. At that moment, he felt even more anticipation. Once Sunshine was upgraded, he would work on the unlock progress. While absorbing sunlight, Syd practiced Sunshine as best as he could. Sunshine experience +1. A soft, golden glow appeared around him, stunning Venom, who was at a loss for words. What is this? Venom was utterly bewildered. He realized he really didn't understand his host, Syd. How long had it been, and Syd had already displayed another inexplicable ability. Glowing. What use was that? Venom circled the young man, trying not to laugh, and asked, Syd, are you trying to become a light bulb? Suddenly, Venom thought of something. Oh, you glowing like that, it does resemble those human depictions of God. Syd shook his head, focusing on practicing Photon Sunshine. Sunshine experience +1. Sunshine experience +1. Sunshine experience +1. As Syd practiced Sunshine early in the morning, actions were also taking place inside Experiment Base 23. 3 black-clad guards walked slowly to a special confinement room. This room was unique, with an empty space around it. There were no other prisoners, and even the iron bars were much thicker, as if specially reinforced. They reached the bars and quickly opened the door, walking towards the figure bound by several chains inside. Number 5, wake up. Noticing their arrival, Number 5 lifted his head. He had a pale complexion, a tall and thin frame, and wore a white suit. His gaze was calm. Come with us. Unlocking his chains, the 3 guards led him to the last confinement room. Chapter 44. Footsteps echoed slowly through the quiet corridor. The group of 4 soon arrived at the confinement room holding number 1. Gazing at this room, which was as strictly guarded as his own, if not more so, number 5's eyes flashed with strong apprehension. Even he was wary of the person inside. It wasn't just because the person inside was powerful, but also because he had the title of Mutant Slayer. Thinking of the pulse interference, even number 5 showed a hint of disgust in his eyes. The 4 of them peered inside. A middle-aged man, appearing to be about 2 meters tall with a burly physique and a body seemingly made of bronze metal, lay with his eyes closed on a white iron bed. Hearing the footsteps, number 1 opened his eyes and looked over. Number 1, there's a mission the base needs you to handle. Leading the group, the warden Mark opened the cell door and walked over to unlock number 1's chains. As the chains fell off, number 1 stretched his body, a ferocious expression appearing on his face. In a rough, booming voice, he said, "A mission? A mission that requires me. What kind of mission is worth my time?" Glancing at the wardens, a faint sneer appeared on his face, feeling they were making a big fuss over nothing, needing him for a trivial task. Moreover, "We're taking number 5 too." Number 1's metallic face showed a hint of anger, feeling insulted. Mark glanced at him and said, "The enemy is very troublesome, a powerful mutant, and this is a direct order from Director Alessandro." Hearing the enemy was a powerful mutant, number 1 became even more indifferent, showing some irritation, ready to scoff. However, upon hearing the name Alessandro, the sneer on his face faded, replaced by respect. Not just him, but number 5 showed a similar expression. Mark smiled and turned, leading the group outside. They walked through the area where the ordinary prisoners were held. In an instant, the previously chatting prisoners fell silent, the area becoming so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. "It's number 1 and number 5. Seeing the metallic gleam of number 1 and the calm, indifferent number 5, the prisoners were terrified, their eyes filled with fear. No one understood the terror of these 2 monsters better than they did. They still remembered when a burly black man tried to harass number 5, and number 5, even under the suppression of the mutant controller, managed to use an energy shock. A red energy blast covered the man in an instant, and within 2 seconds, he was charred and dead on the ground, in a gruesome state. Not to mention, number 5 also had super speed healing, like an unkillable cockroach. No one could defeat him. Number 1 was even more straightforward, punching an offending person into pieces with blood and limbs flying everywhere, scaring countless people to death. After that, anyone who provoked them met a dire end. So, both ordinary prisoners and mutants were terrified of them, not just because of their strength, but also their ruthless, cold-blooded nature, killing without hesitation. Glancing at the prisoners, a sneer flashed in number 1's eyes. He looked down on them, or rather, anyone ranked below him. As they walked past, the prisoners started discussing. "Where are they taking number 1 and number 5? Did you forget about number 37? The previously confused prisoners suddenly understood, feeling schadenfreude and pity. "Number 37 is doomed this time, no one can match those 2 monsters." "Right, even if number 37 is strong, he's finished this time. Let's hope number 37 can survive." Even the freckled youth who had spoken with Syd shook his head. "May God bless you." Bets started on whether number 37 would be brought back with broken limbs or dead. No one believed number 1 and number 5 could fail. Outside the experiment base, number 5 frowned slightly and asked, "Where are you taking us to find your target?" Mark smiled, saying, "Number 37's location is hard to pinpoint, he's constantly moving. We need to wait for a mutant codenamed Bloodhound. But Bloodhound is currently on a mission and can't come immediately, so we need some time." As he led the way, he continued speaking. "Now, I'm taking you to capture another mutant, to help you adapt to each other and possibly learn to cooperate, to avoid any mishaps when dealing with number 37. Hearing about cooperation, both number 1 and number 5 were dismissive. They believed there was no need for cooperation, they could handle number 37 alone. And number 37? Number 1 felt slightly angry, saying, "Are you saying we should go after this so-called number 37? Hearing the ranking, number 1 knew number 37's strength. Thinking about it, a look of disdain appeared on his face. Not just him, but number 5 also looked incredulous, thinking he had misheard. A number 37, needing their intervention? Mark glanced at them, explaining, "After capturing another mutant, I'll explain and show you some data and videos on number 37. Remember, number 37 isn't as easy to deal with as you think. Despite Mark's words, both number 1 and number 5 remained indifferent, feeling he was overreacting, even suggesting watching videos, which they found laughable. Did he not understand their power? The 5 of them got into a car and drove off into the distance. Half an hour later, they stopped outside a house. After getting out, Mark unlocked the mutant controllers on number 1 and number 5. Then, they approached the target house. Bang bang bang. After a series of knocks, a young voice came from inside. Who's there? Click, the door was opened. A blonde teenage boy's head peeked out. Looking very young, Fabian's face turned pale instantly. The metallic body of number 1 and the warden uniforms immediately filled him with unease. Bang. Mark held the door, his voice stern. We received a report saying Fabian used superpowers. Chapter 45. Before Mark could finish speaking, Fabian, realizing their intent, had a change in expression and used his ability. With a loud boom, an invisible telekinetic force surged from his body, rushing towards the 5 people outside the door. Mark and the 3 guards turned pale. Before they could even raise their guns, they were sent flying several meters away, landing hard on the lawn. Number 5 had a similar fate. He was sent flying a few meters by the telekinetic force, sustaining some scratches along the way. However, these scratches healed within seconds. As for number 1, he didn't even move. His body, gleaming with metallic luster, stood firmly in place like a steel pillar, completely unaffected. You. Fabian tried multiple times but couldn't budge number 1, his face turning pale. Number 1 grinned menacingly, little brat. Fabian, feeling panicked, shifted his gaze to the scattered guns on the ground. 3 black handguns floated into the air, their muzzles turning towards number 1, ready to fire at any moment. But before Fabian could fire, no one's action interrupted him. Yellow light flashed in no one's eyes, followed by a strange noise reverberating around them. With a series of clangs, the handguns fell to the ground. My power! Fabian stared in disbelief, fearfully looking at the metallic man with glowing yellow eyes. My ability has been blocked. Number 1 sneered, you worthless brat. Ignoring Fabian's struggles, he easily lifted him by the collar and tossed him in front of Mark. All right, he's yours. What a bore, number 1 said, turning back towards the car. Number 5, eyes flashing with wariness, silently followed. Mark, looking a bit surprised, commented, I underestimated you. Apologizing briefly, Mark directed his attention to Crowley, show them the footage of No 37. Crowley nodded, retrieving a silver tablet and handing it to number 1. Number 1 and number 5 initially seemed indifferent, feeling it was unnecessary, but still watched out of curiosity. As the footage played, showing No 37's abilities and combat scenes, surprise filled their eyes. Even the despairing Fabian looked astonished. As they watched the footage of the teenager in the midst of combat, continually defeating numerous foes with abilities like teleportation, black particles, blue energy beams, and deflecting bullets, admiration filled Fabian's eyes. Number 1 and number 5, despite their initial shock, soon resumed their indifferent expressions. That's No 37. Number 5 asked, he has so many abilities. Inborn Mark nodded. Number 1 and number 5, despite their astonishment, still felt a hint of envy. They had gained their powers through numerous experiments, surviving against all odds. Why did this number 37 have such luck? Such a lucky brat. Number 1 clicked his tongue, but then regained his composure, saying, multiple abilities mean nothing. If he encounters me, it's over for him. Even without his pulse interference ability, number 1 felt confident against number 37. Number 5 shared a similar sentiment. Though he didn't always see eye to eye with number 1, he acknowledged no one's strength, believing he could handle number 37 with his energy blast. At this moment, he looked forward to teaching number 37 a lesson. Mark, shaking his head, warned, while we have gauged No 37's limits and seen his abilities in this footage, you must remain cautious. His many abilities could still catch you off guard. Spend some time at the base to get used to each other. Once the mutant tracker arrives, we'll set off to capture No 37. Fabian, remaining silent, felt sympathy for number 37. Who knew when number 37 would be caught? He couldn't blame himself for thinking this way. The metal man was too powerful, with an annoying ability. He looked at the seemingly unremarkable other person, feeling even more pity for number 37. As they headed back to the 23rd experiment base, the internet was abuzz with activity. To calm the public, the beautiful and charming Irina hosted a live show. In front of tens of thousands of viewers, she wore a black and white dress, her smile enchanting, speaking softly. "Don't worry, viewers. According to the secret information I have, the mutant boy will soon be captured." With an even more charming smile, she continued, "I've heard that the authorities have deployed their secret weapon this time. As for what the secret weapon is, I'll keep it a mystery for now. Just know that this time, the boy won't escape." Ending the live show with a smile, Irina left viewers in heated discussions. Chapter 46. Secret Weapon. Irina looks confident this time, she probably won't fail. I'm really curious. If Irina is so sure that fugitive won't escape, haha. Agreed. Netizens were abuzz with discussions, their hearts filled with anticipation. They were eager to hear Irina announce that the mutant fugitive had been caught. They wondered if there would be a live broadcast this time. Curiosity and expectation filled their minds. While the general public speculated about when the fugitive would be defeated by the secret weapon and captured, some mutants and a few of Syd's acquaintances who saw the news grew worried. In a dark underground tunnel, this little guy, Logan, put down his cigar, his brows furrowing tightly with concern. Chris, beside him, sighed and said, "I hope he'll be okay." Otto and Valentine exchanged a glance. "Do we need to help him?" Otto raised his hand. Valentine shook his head, dismissing the idea. "How can we help when we don't even know where he is? All we can do now is pray that he gets through this danger." Hearing this, Chris frowned. The information Irina revealed is probably true. Those trying to capture Syd must have prepared a secret weapon. Irina sounds very confident, it's likely that Syd. He wanted to say more but eventually fell silent, though everyone understood his meaning. Indeed, considering the strength Syd displayed recently, he wasn't invincible. There were many ways to deal with him. Poison, sniper assassination, a group of well-armed people attacking, and weapons targeting the X gene. Just thinking about it, they could come up with several methods to restrain Syd, not to mention the more terrifying means that Irina called a secret weapon. At this moment, Logan spoke up. "Hey, that kid is in danger, we can't just do nothing. We should try to find him and rescue him." Chris nodded, indicating his willingness to search. Otto and Valentine hesitated for a while before finally agreeing to the idea after looking at each other. After some preparations, they left the sewer and began searching, trying to find Syd before the government did. Besides Logan and the others seeing Irina's broadcast, Professor X in the far-off X mansion was also speaking seriously to Cyclops, "Scott. Scott, have you found that Omega-level mutant?" Standing nearby, Scott shook his head. Hearing this, Professor X felt a bit anxious, worrying that the Omega-level mutant might fall into the wrong hands, potentially causing unimaginable disaster. At this moment, Cyclops, unable to hold back his curiosity, asked, "Professor, is that Omega-level mutant really so important that we must find him?" Professor X glanced at him, shaking his head, knowing Scott hadn't truly witnessed the power of an Omega-level mutant. Even with some understanding, it was merely an estimate based on gene. Professor X explained slowly, "Scott, you don't understand. Omega is not simply a level 5, it's actually an infinite level. The power of an Omega-level mutant cannot be assessed by common standards." Hearing this, Scott looked shocked. Infinite level? Is an Omega-level mutant really that powerful? Is the gap between levels 4 and 5 so vast? As he stood there in amazement, Professor X sighed, "Find him as soon as possible." Then, he looked at Scott. "Scott, do your best to find the Omega-level mutant, but now you need to help another child." Understanding the professor's meaning instantly, Scott nodded. "Professor, I'll take people to save that child. I'll go get Jean and the others." With that, he stepped out of the office to find Jean and Storm. Watching his departing figure, Professor X's worry deepened, concerned for both the Omega-level mutant and the child about to face danger. Half an hour later, Cyclops, having gathered his team, boarded the jet and flew towards the target city. As the X-Men took action, so did Magneto, Eric, within the Brotherhood of Mutants. Turning to Mystique, Eric asked, "Raven, have you found the person I asked for?" The slim, Blue-skinned Mystique shook her head. The kid is too good at hiding, I just can't find him. She had infiltrated government departments, but even they hadn't found him, let alone her alone. Hearing her explanation, Eric frowned, displeased. Keep an eye on those departments. See when they go after the kid, and if necessary, blend in. Eric ordered. Mystique nodded and turned to leave. But before she could go, Eric's voice sounded behind her, by the way, what about the Omega-level mutant I asked you to find? Mystique shook her head again. Eric's frown deepened. Watching her disappear, Eric suddenly laughed, old friend, let's see who finds the Omega-level mutant first. As the X-Men and Brotherhood of Mutants moved, Eddie, fleeing with Venom, also saw the news. Eddie didn't think much of it, soon forgetting after a glance. Besides them, Heidi and the other two, who had once encountered Syd with the underground organization, also saw the news because they always followed his updates. They were now looking at each other. After they parted ways, they asked some mutants what the ultimate threat to mutants meant. Many didn't know. However, they guessed it likely referred to level 4, 5, or even Omega-level mutants. The possibility of level 5 or Omega level wasn't small. They were shocked. Facing the news of Syd being hunted, they felt conflicted, unsure whether to help their friend. Noon. The sky was overcast, clouds thick, a storm seemingly imminent. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. At this moment, Syd was diligently practicing photon energy. Ability, Photon Energy, 11/500, Level 2. Glancing at the panel, he muttered, what lousy weather. If not for the weather, a morning of practice wouldn't have yielded such little progress. Chapter 47. Whoosh. A damp wind blew as heavy rain poured from the sky. Syd frowned, pausing his photon energy practice, and moved under a building to take shelter from the rain. The rain finally stopped by evening. Ability, Photon Energy, 19/500, Level 2. Glancing at his progress, Syd shook his head, looking forward to tomorrow's sun. Time passed, and soon it was the next day. The sun shone brightly. As the sunlight hit him, a series of notifications followed. Photon Energy +1. Photon Energy +1. While Syd was practicing photon energy, the personnel at Base 23 received the arrival of the person they had been waiting for. Base 23. Finally. Number 1 and Number 5, who had been waiting impatiently, looked towards the person being brought in from a distance. Among them were Warden Marco, Captain Kenny, and Captain George, along with a dozen heavily armed soldiers. In the middle of them was the Bloodhound. This person wore grey clothes, had yellow hair, and an ordinary appearance, looking around 30 years old, very unremarkable. Is he the Bloodhound? As the group approached, Number 1 asked impatiently. Captain Kenny, standing next to the Bloodhound, nodded. Yes, he's the Bloodhound. He then took out a pillow that the mutant boy had once used and handed it to the Bloodhound. Under the watchful eyes of Number 1 and Number 5, the Bloodhound sniffed the pillow carefully and then started searching around the base. Soon, he walked straight in a specific direction, seemingly having locked onto the scent molecules left behind by his target. Seeing the Bloodhound determine the direction, Captain George and Captain Kenny secretly breathed a sigh of relief. They had feared that last night's heavy rain would wash away the traces, but it seemed that a mutant's abilities were exceptional. Even after such a long time, he could still track the scent. The group got into vehicles, following the Bloodhound. The Bloodhound, moving swiftly ahead, resembled an actual hunting dog. Time passed, and after about half an hour. Suddenly, the Bloodhound, who had been running ahead, slowed down and stopped. The area ahead was very secluded, and even the streets and houses looked very run down. Are we near Number 37's hiding place? Captain George, getting out of the car, was excited, his eyes shining. The Bloodhound nodded. We've found him, haha. Number 37, let's see how you escape this time. Captain Kenny laughed grimly. Captain George also sneered. Number 37, just come with us and be our lab rat. They began to set up their operation. Click, click, click. 5 sentinel spiders crawled out of a safe, their mechanical eyes glowing red. Meanwhile, Warden Marco led 2 men towards a distant high-rise building. They would monitor the target from a high vantage point, using drones to lock onto his position. If they spotted him, they would immediately relay his escape location to George and the others. Even with the bloodhound, they took these precautions to avoid any mishaps. Looking at the remaining dozen people, number 5 casually said, "Leave this fight to us. You can watch or provide support." Captain George and Captain Kenny nodded, feeling confident. While they discussed, Syd also noticed something unusual. "Syd, be careful." Venom suddenly emerged from his right hand, looking solemnly into the distance. Syd's brow furrowed slightly, becoming alert. He knew Venom's senses were sharp and it must have detected something. Deflection shield +1. An invisible shield appeared in front of him. Syd cautiously approached the outside and looked into the distance. The next second, his expression changed slightly. A group of familiar-looking people stood in the distance, one of them pointing towards him, seemingly saying the target was inside. Spatial transfer +1. Spatial transfer +1. In Venom's astonished gaze, Syd's figure disappeared from where he stood. However, Syd frowned, realizing that no matter where he hid, the distant people seemed always able to find his location. Syd knew he had to deal with these people to escape. The next second, maintaining his deflection shield, he walked outside. Open ground. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, a mysterious figure in black, with his face hidden by a black hood, walked out slowly. "You finally came out." Captain Kenny grinned maliciously. "Let's see how you run this time." At this moment, a faint smile appeared on the metallic face of number 1. "Are you the so-called number 37, the waste?" Number 5 remained indifferent. Captain Kenny sneered again. "Do you know who they are? Compared to them, you're nothing. Just come back to the lab with us, haha." He laughed loudly, venting the frustration built up over repeated failures. Finally, he could deal with this guy properly. Captain Kenny was in a good mood. Beside him, Captain George felt similarly, smiling broadly. Number 5 possessed superspeed healing and energy blasts. Number 1 had a metallic body, enhanced strength, heightened senses, and most importantly, pulse interference. How could this kid fight against that? He sneered. In a moment, even if number 37 wanted to run, he couldn't. Without his abilities, number 37 would be an ordinary person. How could he resist? Syd tilted his head. "Is that so?" "Had." Seeing Syd's defiance, Captain George sneered. "You'll soon see how powerful they are. It'll be miserable for you." As he finished, number 5 stepped forward, his expression calm and indifferent. "All right, let me play with you first." Number 1 glanced at him, crossing his arms, saying nothing. Although he didn't think highly of number 5, dealing with number 37 would be more than enough. Probably, number 37 would be dead in a single move? The nearby Captain George and others began to worry, fearing that number 5 might be too harsh and kill number 37 outright. Under everyone's gaze, number 5 made his move. In an instant, terrifying red energy surged from number 5, distorting the surrounding light. The energy wave forced Captain George and the others to retreat, their faces showing horror. Such terrifying energy! As this thought emerged, the next second, several meters of red energy burst forth like a giant wave, sweeping towards number 37. Boom! The ground disintegrated inch by inch in its path. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the red energy engulfed Syd. Number 37 is finished. This thought popped into everyone's mind. Chapter 48. As number 5's red energy engulfed number 37, no one believed he could survive. Number 5's expression remained indifferent, as if he was used to this outcome. Number 1 shook his head. Captain George sneered, "I told you to come back to the lab with us. Why didn't you listen?" Captain Kenny, on the other hand, felt a bit regretful, blaming number 5 for being too heavy-handed. "What a pity. Looks like you won't escape this time, ha ha ha." However, as the red energy subsided, they were shocked by what they saw. The red glow gradually faded, revealing the boy standing unscathed, as if nothing had happened. "What? Number 37 didn't die? Impossible." Captain Kenny stared in disbelief at Syd, standing unharmed. How could he be fine? Captain George's sneer froze in disbelief. Number 5's previously indifferent expression changed, his eyes widening in surprise. Number 1 was also astonished. How could this be? While they struggled to believe their eyes, they heard the boy say calmly, "Returning to you." The next moment, something even more shocking happened. Boom! A massive surge of red energy appeared in front of Syd and rushed towards number 5. You! Number 5, in disbelief, hastily countered with his own red energy. Boom! A flash of red light erupted, and as the dust settled, Captain Kenny and the others stared in shock. Number 5's body was charred, his clothes mostly incinerated, and he looked utterly disheveled. Had he reacted too slowly, or what? Number 5 hadn't completely blocked the attack? But the most important thing was that number 37 had used number 5's ability. This is impossible! Captain Kenny shouted, unable to accept it. How did you do that? How can you have such an ability? Were your previous displays not your limit? He was utterly incredulous. Captain George, number 1, and the dozen soldiers were also in disbelief. Number 37 has so many abilities. Others were shocked, but number 1 and number 5 couldn't help but feel a surge of jealousy. Why does he have so many abilities as a mutant? It's not fair. But, despite Syd's numerous abilities, it didn't mean they were afraid. Under Syd's astonished gaze, number 5's charred body began to change. Muscles wriggled and healed, blackened tissue fell away, and new skin quickly regenerated. Soon, a seemingly reborn number 5 stood before everyone. This is rapid regeneration, truly powerful. Captain Kenny and the others were visibly impressed. Given number 5's previous injuries, a normal person would have died long before infection set in. But number 5 recovered in less than a minute. What terrifying regenerative power! No wonder number 5 is called a monster. The soldier's eyes were filled with fear. If he could always regenerate like this, who could ever defeat him or kill him? Captain George sneered, "You can't kill number 5. See that? Stop struggling, you can't win. If you resist, you'll only find despair." The others regained their confidence. With number 5's rapid healing and number 1's abilities, what chance did number 37 have? Number 5's eyes flashed red. "You've angered me." "Really?" Syd asked calmly. Under everyone's expectant gaze, red energy once again surged from number 5. He extended his hand, forming a red energy blast. Boom! Number 5 threw it forward. As everyone watched, the boy in the black hood raised his right hand and casually swatted at the red energy ball, like swatting a fly. Crash! The sound of shattering glass echoed. In Venom's and everyone's stunned gaze, the red energy ball flew back at unimaginable speed. Ah! Number 5 screamed. The red energy ball hit him, sending him flying. His body crashed into a distant wall with a thunderous sound. As the wall cracked, everyone could faintly hear the sound of bones breaking. Looking at the disheveled number 5 and then at Syd, who had casually swatted the red energy ball away, everyone was dumbfounded. What's going on? How could this happen? They could hardly believe what they were seeing. Number 5, like an ant, couldn't even fight back? This number 37. At this moment, number 1, with his rocky metallic skin, stepped forward. Glancing at number 5, he scowled impatiently, "Number 5, you're becoming more useless. Can't even handle a kid, what a waste." In the distance, number 5 climbed to his feet with a look of resentment. Number 1's yellow eyes turned to Syd, and he sneered. "Kid, don't think that just because you made number 5 look pathetic, you can win. I'm not like him. He's a waste, but He sneered. In the next moment, under everyone's excited and expectant gaze, his eyes glowed yellow. Pulse interference. Captain George and the others perked up, smiling broadly. Number 1's eyes glowed yellow as he sneered, "Under my pulse interference, you can't use your mutant abilities. How does it feel to have power but be unable to use it?" Ha ha ha. Number 1 laughed. At this moment, number 5, deliberately kept out of the pulse interference range, chuckled coldly. Red light surged from his body, forming a crimson energy ball in his right hand. In the next second, he hurled the energy ball towards Syd. Boom! The red energy ball soared through the air, distorting the light around it. Seeing this, the soldiers perked up, Captain George sneered, and Captain Kenny grinned. Number 1 glanced over, unconcerned. But in the next second, something unexpected happened. Crash! The sound of shattering glass. The crimson energy ball suddenly changed direction, flying straight towards the unconcerned number 1's chest. Boom! Red light exploded, and number 1 was sent flying, his body smashing into a distant wall. Captain George and the others were stunned. Syd tilted his head, what pulse? Chapter 49. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. $4.5 www.patreon.com/Zalum. Thank you for your support. Seeing number 1 being blasted away by the energy surge and looking at the boy standing there, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. Pulse interference failed. This is impossible. Captain George couldn't believe it. Neither he nor Kenny, nor number 1 and number 5, could comprehend it. They all knew one thing very well, no one could use their abilities under pulse interference. This had been confirmed through countless experiments and battles. Yet now, the scene before them shattered their conclusions. Number 37 could still use his mutant abilities under pulse interference? Captain George was in utter disbelief, and the others were no better off. This defied common sense. Number 5 couldn't hold back and asked directly, Number 1, did you not use pulse interference on him? The others thought the same, their eyes turning to number 1. Number 1 climbed up, looking a bit disheveled. Despite his metallic body, he wasn't really hurt. Seeing his body, everyone couldn't help but marvel at his defense capabilities. Number 1 angrily replied, I did use it. I don't know what's going on, this kid. He stared at Syd in bewilderment, mumbling, why did the pulse interference fail? This shouldn't be possible, there's no ability I can't counter. Syd glanced at him. Indeed, the pulse interference hadn't failed. When number 1 activated the pulse interference, Syd clearly felt his energy absorption stop working. Even though sunlight hit his body, he couldn't absorb any energy. However, he discovered that the pulse interference had no effect on his mimicry abilities, and he could still use the abilities of Orochi. Moreover, the light energy within him hadn't disappeared, which was why he could still react. He silently marveled at the bizarre nature of mutant abilities. If not for the special nature of his mimicry, he might have been caught this time. Thinking this, his gaze towards number 1 and the others grew colder. Delaying could lead to complications, and he didn't intend to drag this out any longer. As he prepared to act, Captain Kenny sneered from a distance. Number 37, you really surprise me more and more. You can use your abilities even under number 1's pulse interference. What secret do you have? How are you so special? Shaking his head, he continued, but it doesn't matter. Even if you can resist number 1's pulse interference, you can't kill number 1 and number 5. In the end, you'll still end up in the cold lab. And this time, we're fully prepared. You can't escape. His face was full of cold sneers. Captain George also sneered, just come back to the lab with us, haha. The dozen soldiers around them regained their confidence. As for number 1 and number 5, their expressions also calmed down. As Captain George and Captain Kenny said, no matter how special number 37 was, he couldn't cause any significant trouble. Under absolute power, his struggles were futile. Kneel down, kid. Number 1 sneered, stomping heavily towards him. The wind howled. Every step he took left a deep footprint, revealing his immense power. Number 5's body once again surged with red energy. At the same time, 5 black sentinel spiders began to move. As Kenny and the others watched with anticipation and number 5 and number 1 prepared to join forces to kill the boy in the distance, an unexpected change occurred. Sunshine experience +1. Return to nothingness. A dazzling light shone overhead. In an instant, a faint light enveloped everything around them. Number 1, who was running, paused and slowly stopped. Number 5 also halted his actions. Captain George and the others looked around. What's happening? What is this light? As they wondered, they suddenly felt intense pain, and some soldiers began to scream. Ah! My body! Everyone, enduring the pain, looked around in panic, and their eyes widened in shock. Under the faint light, everything on their bodies began to disappear. Clothes, guns, even flesh, everything disintegrated into particles, which then vanished into nothingness. Witnessing this horrifying scene, no one could remain calm, and fear filled their eyes. What is this? Is it you? How is this possible? Suddenly, Captain Kenny turned, glaring at the boy in the distance. How are you doing this? What is this light? What kind of ability is this? He couldn't believe it, and neither could the others. What are these lights? Is this one of number 37's abilities? How could this be? In a frenzy, someone fired at Syd, but it was useless. Moreover, both number 1 and number 5 began to disintegrate. Even though red energy surged from number 5, it couldn't stop the disintegration. Number 1's metallic body also began to disintegrate bit by bit. This was an ability they had never seen before. A Class 5 ability? Or? Fear filled everyone's faces. Unfortunately, no matter how they reacted, their fate was sealed. Particles filled the air as they began to disintegrate. Soon, people started to collapse and die. No. In his final moments, Captain Kenny roared in unwillingness. I don't want to die, no. He began to babble incoherently, his mind breaking down in despair and anger. Why resist? Why not come back to the lab with us? Why, no. With a final scream of despair, he disintegrated into particles and vanished. At the same time, Captain George met the same fate, his face full of terror. Despair consumed him as he pleaded, spare me. Spare me. Number 37, please. But before he could finish, he too disintegrated into particles, completely disappearing. The dozen soldiers, including the observing bloodhound, followed suit. Only the 5 sentinel spiders, number 1, and number 5 remained. But the sentinel spiders didn't last long, their black bodies cracking and disintegrating into countless particles, disappearing without a trace. As for number 1 and number 5, Syd's cold gaze turned towards them. Chapter 50. Number 5 was enveloped in red energy, trying to resist the disintegration caused by the light. To his credit, it did help somewhat, the disintegration slowed down a bit. However, the effect was minimal. As the red energy shielding him was being broken down, his body began to come into contact with the light, causing his flesh to disintegrate into particles. Simultaneously, his rapid healing tried to counteract this effect, creating a brief stalemate. Unfortunately for him, the disintegration outpaced his healing. The balance tilted towards destruction. Number 5 stared in disbelief at the boy in the distance. Massive amounts of energy surged around Syd, causing his black clothes to flutter dramatically, giving him an ethereal appearance as if he could take flight at any moment. An aura of terror and light emanated from him, seemingly capable of warding off anyone attempting to approach. Number 5 struggled to extend his right hand, stepping towards the boy in a bid to stop him. But under the enveloping light, all his efforts were in vain. His flesh began to vanish, exposing his white bones. On the other side, number 1 fared no better, if not worse. Despite his rocky, metallic body being incredibly resilient, it too was unwaveringly disintegrating. In a short span, most of it had vanished, revealing large areas of bone. Yellow blood flowed, and his still beating heart could be seen faintly. With a groan of anger and unwillingness, his entire body collapsed to the ground. Bang! A few seconds later, his massive frame also turned into particles. Number 5 extended his skeletal right hand, trying to grasp something, but his movement froze in place. As he fell to the ground, his body rapidly disintegrated. At that moment, everything around them vanished. The light gradually dimmed, and the black robes around Syd's body settled down. When everything calmed, the sight was eerily silent, and nothing remained where those people had been. Silent, terrifying. Syd glanced at the completely vanished people and felt the depletion of light energy within him, making him somewhat helpless. The power of sunshine was immense, but the consumption was equally exaggerated. Just one use, and his light energy was nearly exhausted. Luckily, the sunlight above quickly restored his light energy, otherwise, he wouldn't know what to do next. Apart from the issue of insufficient light energy, he noticed another problem with using sunshine this time. Number 5's red energy could slightly block the power of sunshine. And his healing ability delayed the disintegration significantly. Number 1 also disintegrated slower than ordinary people when his metallic body was targeted. It seems sunshine needs to be improved. Syd thought, shaking his head. Although sunshine had the essence of an Omega-level ability, it was only at level 2, so its strength was somewhat lacking. For it to have reached this level of power was already impressive. If it were at level 5, those people wouldn't last a second before turning into particles and vanishing into thin air. Syd glanced at the experience bar for sunshine, looking forward to its performance at level 3. At that moment, Venom suddenly emerged from his right hand. Syd, you. Venom's small head, full of teeth, gaped wide as if it could swallow a basketball. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. The boy before him seemed godlike. Don't talk, Syd said, not paying attention to Venom for now, and instead scanned the sky. During the use of sunshine, he had sensed something in the sky being obliterated by the light. Could it be drones? Syd frowned and, sensing the slightly recovered energy within him, began searching the area. 10 minutes later, he reached the rooftop of an abandoned building. Seeing the uncollected equipment on the ground, Syd frowned deeply. Is anyone else here? Standing on the rooftop, he scanned the surroundings but found no suspicious individuals. It seems they ran away. He turned to Venom. Venom, can you sense anyone suspicious nearby? Venom shook his head. Forget it. Syd frowned and then relaxed. It seemed those people couldn't be found. Searching wasn't his strength. Instead of wasting time, he should focus on improving Sunshine's level and unlocking progress. If Sunshine's level increased and the unlocking progress reached 100%, he would have more confidence even in the face of danger. Syd turned and left the abandoned building. As he walked, he pondered, although I didn't deal with everyone, it was still a relief. Thinking of the detestable Captain George and Captain Kenny, he smiled slightly. Soon, there will be that experimental base. Syd's eyes gleamed with determination. He hadn't forgotten who the real mastermind behind the constant hunts was. If he had enough power, he would have destroyed it already. As he was lost in thought, Venom couldn't hold back any longer. Recalling the recent events, he still felt a surge of shock. What kind of power was that? Unbelievable. It was like the power of a god. Terrifying. Looking at Syd, he felt that his host seemed shrouded in mystery, filled with an aura of the unknown. Suddenly, Venom remembered something and said, Syd, you told me a few days ago that the sunshine distortion was an illusion. He also remembered teasing Syd recently, saying that the light emanating from him made him look like a light bulb. It turns out it wasn't a light bulb but such a terrifying power. Venom was stunned. Facing number 1 and number 5 initially, even he felt despair, thinking it was over. But unexpectedly, the moment the light enveloped everything, he felt suffocated. That power, capable of destroying everything, made him feel like he was truly seeing a god. Casually obliterating everything, like a deity. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he felt. It was your illusion. Seeing Venom's naive little head, Syd casually responded. As they conversed, about a kilometer away, 3 people were running frantically. Pant, pant. Warden Marco ran desperately. At this moment, he covered his mouth with his hand, his eyes filled with terror, not daring to stop. The other 2 soldiers were in similar states, their eyes filled with fear, their minds in chaos, nearly driven insane. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. Chapter 51. Light destroyed everything. Recalling not long ago, under the light, Captain George and his men had no resistance and were all turned to ash. Warden Marco and the others couldn't help but show fear in their eyes. What was that? Power of number 37. How could there be such power? Warden Marco felt a chill. The other 2 soldiers didn't fare much better. At this moment, their hearts were filled only with fear, deeply terrified by that power. Is that a power humans can possess? It was simply godlike. A deep shadow was left in their hearts. From now on, whenever someone mentioned mutants, they would involuntarily think of that boy and feel fear. That power that destroyed everything. After running for a while longer, when they couldn't sustain it anymore, they finally stopped. Their hearts beating rapidly, they gasped for a while before calming down, their terror also slowly subsiding. After regaining some composure, the slightly older soldier, Jero, asked while panting, Marco, what do we do now? Captain George and the others, they're all dead. He swallowed in fear. Warden Marco took a deep breath, glanced at them, and said, report this to Base Commander Alessandro quickly. Let's hurry and get a car back to the base to avoid being chased by that monster. Upon hearing this, the 2 soldiers also became terrified, hurriedly running to the nearby road, anxiously trying to hail a car. More than half an hour later, they returned to Base 23 by car. With hurried steps, they came to Base Commander Alessandro's office, and Marco knocked urgently on the door. Come in. The 3 hurried inside. Noticing the 3, especially Marco among them, Alessandro felt puzzled. Marco, weren't you with George to capture number 37? How come? Did you capture him? He asked with interest, appearing somewhat spirited. It had been a while without capturing that kid. Now that they had, it was still something to be happy about. However, just as he finished speaking, he noticed something unusual. Marco and the other two, who were previously somewhat normal, instantly turned pale with fear on their faces, as if they had thought of something terrifying. "What happened to you?" Alessandro asked in confusion. Marco replied in fear, "Sir, Captain George and the others, they're dead." The calm-faced Alessandro's eyes widened instantly. He stood up and asked, "What did you say, dead? How could they be dead?" The three began to explain. After listening to their account, Base Commander Alessandro said in disbelief, "What? Light destroyed everything. George and the others all died under the light, turning to dust." Alessandro was full of doubt and disbelief. He thought, these three must be mad, or they were playing a joke on him. Otherwise, how could they say something so outrageous? "Commander Alessandro, I swear to God, it's true." Marco's face was serious. "We saw the light destroy everything. Even number 1 and number 5 were no exception, they all died under the power of number 37. Seeing the three still fearful, Alessandro was shocked. Really? The kid he never took seriously, thinking a few abilities were not threatening, actually had such power? So, what exactly was that light? He couldn't help but feel curious and intrigued, wanting to find out what power that kid possessed. At this moment, Alessandro frowned and asked, "What about number 1's pulse interference?" Number 1 didn't have time to use it. Warden Marco shook his head and replied, "The pulse interference failed." "What?" Alessandro was even more shocked. His face darkened. That kid hid too deeply, is this his full power? What a cunning little devil! At this moment, he wished he could capture that kid immediately and put him on the experimental table for research. What was that light? How could it have such power? And why could number 37 resist number 1's pulse interference? All these questions puzzled Alessandro. As for the capture, it seemed it needed careful planning. With the mysterious power that kid had, it seemed impossible to take him down easily. It would require a significant price, at least sending over 100 people to besiege him. Whether it could succeed, he still had some confidence. No matter how unbelievable the power that kid had, he was still human. As long as he was human, he could be dealt with. The opponent would eventually run out of energy. Kenny's earlier speculation might not be wrong. The opponent surely had limits, and now they had data on his power range. With enough people, they could definitely wear him down. Alessandro thought confidently. At this moment, he couldn't wait to start the next capture. However, it still needed careful planning, and mobilizing the troops would take some time. 2 hours later, an uninvited guest arrived outside Base 23. By a big tree, a fully armed soldier was just passing by when a blue figure swung down from the tree branch. With a swift and powerful kick, the soldier was knocked out instantly, almost without making a sound. Mystique Raven smiled, her skin turning layer by layer until she transformed into the soldier lying on the ground. Picking up the soldier, Raven agilely climbed the tree, snapped the soldier's neck with a click, and placed him on the branch. After searching for some identity information, Raven jumped down from the tree silently, as agile as a cat. Then, she began patrolling. Over an hour later, Raven roughly figured out the situation and focused on a soldier. This person was one of the 2 soldiers who witnessed the battle not long ago. According to the information from the warden and prisoners, he was one of the 3 survivors. Raven's eyes showed doubt. What happened? How did only 3 survive? Based on the information she gathered, many went out to capture that mutant boy, including 2 heavyweights. Number 1 and number 5. Thinking about these 2, even Mystique felt a chill. She could hardly believe how the mutant boy survived, even killed them. Super speed healing, energy impact, body metallization, strength enhancement, pulse interference, etc. With such strong abilities, how could they be killed? Did that mutant kid have such power? At this moment, Raven was filled with deep confusion and disbelief. Naturally, she focused on this soldier, wanting to find out the truth from him. Chapter 52. Ugh. After a brief struggle, Raven covered his mouth and dragged him into a room. Tell me about the battle against that mutant kid. Mystique began her interrogation. Jaro initially didn't want to answer, but under Mystique's methods, he painfully started to talk. Mystique listened, puzzled, while taking out a recording pen to record the soldier's account, intending to let Eric hear it later. Soon, she noticed that as he recalled, the soldier named Jairo's face was filled with fear. He was terrifying. We thought the battle was foolproof, especially with number 1 and number 5 there. But he recounted how number 5 made a move, using an energy blast, only to be effortlessly knocked away by the boy. As he continued, Mystique's face showed surprise. This mutant kid seemed unexpectedly strong. When Jairo mentioned that number 1's pulse interference had no effect on the boy, Mystique was stunned. Based on her earlier information, number 1's pulse interference was very strong. It was because of this that she didn't dare to easily enter this experimental base or sneak into their ranks, fearing the pulse interference would nullify her shape-shifting abilities. But now, this soldier told her that number 1's pulse interference failed? It failed against that mutant kid. This mutant kid. At this moment, Mystique's yellow pupils were filled with astonishment. Meanwhile, Jairo's face was full of fear. Just when I thought this was almost the kid's limit, he... Panting, he was so terrified he could barely speak. What did he do? Mystique asked in confusion. What could make this soldier so scared? Jairo fearfully muttered, the light destroyed everything. Including number 1 and number 5, they all died in the light unleashed by number 37. The power of that light was unstoppable, unlike anything a human could possess, like a god's power. They all died, all turned to ash under the light, ha ha ha. As he spoke, he became hysterical, seemingly driven mad by fear. Listening to his account, Mystique was filled with shock. Light. What kind of light has such power? All dead. At this moment, she was filled with confusion, not understanding what kind of light the soldier was talking about that had such terrifying power. Just as she was about to ask for more details, an alarm sounded within the experimental base, indicating an intruder. Mystique frowned, knowing she couldn't continue. With a snap, she dealt with the soldier named Jairo. At this moment, the 23rd base was in chaos, with soldiers searching for the intruder. Experienced in infiltration and escape, Mystique easily transformed into someone else and slipped out of the base. By the time the base personnel realized, it was too late. After escaping the experimental base, Raven took a deep look at the distant base. She had intended to stay at the base to gather more information about the mutant boy, such as his parents' identities, hoping to find something useful, but not this time, maybe next time. Raven shook her head and left with curiosity about the mutant boy. As she left the base, the prisoners inside were also talking. Someone sneaked in. The base is really going downhill, hey. One prisoner sneered. To be honest, someone sneaking into the experimental base wasn't the most shocking thing to them. The most shocking thing was what they had heard not long ago. Those who went to capture number 37, including number 1 and number 5, were all dead. This news was as shocking as experiencing a magnitude 9 earthquake. Those were number 5 with self-healing abilities and number 1 with pulse interference and other powers. Previously, they had been gloating and pitying. Some even bet on whether number 37 would be brought back with broken limbs or dead, not one thinking he would escape. But now, they heard that number 1 and number 5 were all killed by number 37? Every prisoner was stunned. I suspect I heard wrong. How did he do it? Could it be that number 37 can really escape the base's capture? Time passed, and after half an hour, Raven, holding the recording pen, prepared to return to the Brotherhood of Mutants. However, to her surprise, she encountered 3 interesting individuals on the way. Hiding in a concealed corner, Raven quietly observed the 3 not far away. 1 man and 2 women, all wearing black battle suits with an X emblem. One of the women had white hair and blue eyes, with slightly dark skin, unmistakably Storm. The other had red hair, with a uniquely charming appearance, Phoenix Jean. As for the man, he wore black glasses, clearly Cyclops Scott. Ororo, Jean, Scott. Raven was surprised. Suddenly, Jean, walking on the street, stopped. Jean, what's wrong? Cyclops Scott turned to ask. Phoenix gestured for him to stay quiet and then looked to the right. I sensed you. Jean said. Raven frowned, knowing Jean wasn't bluffing. She slowly walked out. Mystique. Scott and Aurora were surprised, then became alert. Though Mystique was also a mutant, she was a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and their relationship wasn't good. What are you doing here? Scott asked warily. What are you doing here? Mystique retorted. Without waiting for their answer, Raven quickly guessed the reason and smiled. You're also here for that mutant kid, aren't you? To save him. She laughed. Scott frowned. Seeing their expressions, Raven chuckled and said, then you're a step too late. What? Scott's face changed, sensing something wrong. That kid, could he? Knowing what they were thinking, Raven raised an eyebrow and said, he's fine, in fact, he's exceeded your expectations. Knowing it was futile to escape easily with Jean's mental powers around, Raven candidly explained. Chapter 53. Not injured? Unexpected? Scott and the others looked at each other in surprise. What do you mean, unexpected? Scott asked, puzzled. Raven smiled slightly and said something astonishing, that kid is terrifyingly strong. Everyone sent to capture him died at his hands. Among them were two powerful mutants, one with superspeed healing and energy blasts, the other with pulse interference. After detailing the abilities of these two individuals, Raven smiled, but these two powerful mutants also died at the hands of that boy. Hearing Mystique's explanation, Jean and the others were shocked. Such powerful mutants, all dead? How did they die? Storm's blue eyes were full of confusion. The next second, Mystique Raven gave an answer that left them stunned. They died under the light, in the light released by that boy. They all died. What? All died in the light? Scott and the others were shocked. What light? What kind of light can kill such powerful mutants? Scott asked in confusion. That, I don't know. Raven smiled. Scott turned to Jean. Jean, is she telling the truth? She's not lying, Jean said, using her telepathy. Scott and Storm were visibly surprised and deeply puzzled. At that moment, they couldn't help but want to see that light for themselves. What kind of light could kill two powerful mutants? Where is he now? Scott inquired. I don't know. Raven shook her head and then said, okay, can I leave now? Scott hesitated for a moment, knowing there was no point in keeping Mystique, so he nodded. Raven gave them one last look and left, intending to return to the Brotherhood of Mutants and report the situation to Eric. After her silhouette disappeared, Storm spoke, what should we do now? Let's report this to the professor, Scott said. He took out his phone and called Professor X. Soon, the call connected. Scott. Did you find him? Professor X's voice came from the other end. Scott glanced at Jean and the others and said, Professor, we. He then recounted their encounter with Mystique and what she had told them. The boy used light to kill all those who were hunting him. Professor X frowned, focusing on the light. What kind of mutant ability is so powerful? At that moment, not only were Scott and the others surprised, puzzled, and curious, but he was also eager to meet that boy. While he instructed Scott to continue searching for the boy, a storm was brewing online. Since the host Irina announced that the government would deploy a secret weapon to capture the mutant boy, countless netizens had been following her updates. At this moment, the internet was flooded with comments urging her for news. Irina, have they caught him yet? What is the secret weapon? Give us the latest updates. The flood of comments made Irina break into a cold sweat, feeling a bit panicked. According to the latest information she had received, the operation had failed. Even the secret weapon prepared had died at the hands of that boy. With all this happening, how was she supposed to respond to the netizens? At this moment, besides disbelief, she felt a deep regret. If she had known, she wouldn't have made such bold statements about the secret weapon ensuring the boy's capture. What should she do now? Should she tell the truth? While she was at a loss, her boss called. What? Tell the truth. Irina said in surprise. On the other end, her boss's calm voice continued. This matter cannot be hidden. It's better to say it sooner to minimize the impact. But try to keep it brief and not damage the government's credibility too much. Hearing this, Irina felt relieved and smiled, Don't worry, boss, I'll handle it. After hanging up, she immediately started preparing her script. An hour and a half later, the highly anticipated live broadcast began. Under the spotlight, Irina, dressed in a bright red dress, looked radiant and captivating. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Irina. With a sweet smile, Irina said, Today, I'm here to tell you the outcome of the recent operation to capture the mutant boy. Hearing her words, whether viewers harbored ill will towards mutants or were just curious, all eyes were filled with anticipation. Finally, there's an outcome. They succeeded, right? When will the mutant fugitive be shown? With the secret weapon, that mutant kid must have been captured, no doubt. When will the trial for that fugitive be? Viewers buzzed with discussion, eagerly awaiting Irina's announcement. However, the next second, they heard an answer that left them stunned. Dear viewers, I'm sorry to say that this operation failed. Irina sighed. At those words, countless expressions froze, especially those who had been certain the mutant fugitive would be caught and tried. They were now incredulous. Soon, curses erupted from the viewers. Shit, are the authorities all useless? They couldn't catch one person. What happened to the secret weapon? Even with a secret weapon, they couldn't catch a mutant. Trash. Amidst the overwhelming criticism, questioning how the authorities couldn't catch one mutant kid, Irina offered an explanation. Sighing heavily, she said, "It's not as you think. The authorities really tried their best. That mutant was just too difficult to handle." After a brief hesitation, she said something that seemed unbelievable to everyone watching. She slowly said, "That mutant boy used the power of light to eliminate everyone hunting him, including the secret weapon." At those words, the many viewers watching the live broadcast were stunned. Light? The boy used light to eliminate everyone hunting him? At that moment, everyone was both shocked and incredulous. Chapter 54. How could this be possible? Many people didn't believe the result, thinking Irina was deceiving them. Voices of doubt arose. What light? How could it be that powerful? Exactly, we don't believe it. Under the spotlight. Knowing there would be skepticism, Irina spoke heavily, "This is true. I take legal responsibility for my words. You can report and verify the facts." Hearing Irina's statement, even the most skeptical viewers had to believe it, though they were filled with disbelief. What kind of light could eliminate all the pursuers? It was just too unbelievable. Confusion filled everyone's hearts. At this moment, Irina continued, "Dear viewers, rest assured, our program team will follow up on this matter. Soon, everyone will know the full story." She smiled, "You need not worry too much. This time, the mutant boy escaped by luck. Our department was careless. After all, everyone can have a moment of carelessness. The next operation will definitely capture him." Her words eased the audience's emotions a bit, and they began to look forward to the next capture attempt's success. They also hoped for another live broadcast to see what the so-called light was all about. While the audience was buzzing with discussion, some mutants who were closely following Irina also noticed this live broadcast. On a secluded street, Logan and his companions stopped searching, looking at each other. "This kid." Logan couldn't help but sigh. Otto laughed, "Looks like we don't need to find him. He solved the problem himself, quite impressive." Chris and Valentine nodded in agreement. At this moment, besides being surprised that Syd eliminated those who were hunting him, they were also puzzled about one thing. Light? Does Syd have the ability to emit light? Why didn't anyone know? At this moment, they were both astonished and confused. Additionally, they were worried about Irina's mention of the next capture attempt. It's clear that the next operation would be even bigger, and Syd's chances of escape would be lower. A mere mutant repeatedly embarrassing the government departments, they wouldn't rest until he's captured. Understanding this, Logan and the others' happiness quickly faded, replaced by worry for Syd. While they were worried about Syd, Magneto was also watching the live broadcast at the Brotherhood of Mutants headquarters. Eric's eyes showed astonishment. Light. Does that boy have other abilities? After a while, Raven returned. As soon as she arrived, Mystique smiled, "Eric, I've got some useful information about that mutant boy you're interested in." Eric immediately became interested. Then, he saw Raven take out a black recording pen. As she played the recording, Raven recounted her infiltration of the base and the information she obtained. When the recording pen played Jairo's description of the light destroying everything, even Eric was visibly moved. Jairo's voice kept playing. "The light destroyed everything. The power of that light is unstoppable, unlike anything a human could possess, like a god's power. They're all dead, all turned to ash under the light, ha ha ha." The recording's detailed content moved Eric deeply, more so than Irina's vague words in the live broadcast. The light Irina mentioned had such great power. Despite getting more detailed information, his astonishment and confusion didn't lessen but rather increased. What kind of light was it to be so terrifying? Terrifying enough that even from the voice, it was clear the soldier's mind had been affected. After a long silence, Eric said solemnly, "Find that boy. Raven, take more people with you, and find him." Raven nodded. While the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants were taking action, Syd Castell was diligently practicing Sunshine. Sunshine Experience +1. Sunshine Experience +1. Ability, Sunshine, 27/500, Level 2. At this moment, Venom's small head emerged from his right hand. "Syd, what exactly are you doing?" Venom asked, puzzled. He was a bit confused. Since meeting Syd, he had been practicing his superpowers continuously without using them for actual combat. It looked strange. What was the use of this practice? He pondered. Was it to become more proficient with his superpowers, attempting more precise control? Syd glanced at him and casually said, "I'm practicing my superpowers. You know, superpowers need practice. If not practiced, they get rusty." "Really?" Venom was puzzled. While chatting with Venom, Syd glanced at the estimated lifespan on the panel. Age, 16, remaining lifespan, 90 days. Phew. Syd let out a slight sigh of relief. His internal photon energy had increased significantly, finally extending his lifespan to a barely sufficient level, avoiding sudden death. As long as the increase continued and more abilities were unlocked, he would eventually overcome the various cancers in his body. As night fell, the progress of Sunshine had improved considerably. Ability, Sunshine, 89/500, Level 2. Looking at the progress on the panel, Syd hesitated. This is too slow, he thought. It would take several more days to level up Sunshine to Level 3. He was hesitating whether to first improve the unlocking progress to gain new abilities. After a while, Syd shook his head. He couldn't resist continuing to improve Sunshine. At Level 3, Sunshine's range would be greatly enhanced, making him better prepared for various situations. Even the power and intensity of Sunshine would increase significantly. If Sunshine had been at Level 3 earlier, Number 5 and Number 1 would have died even faster. Time flew by, and 6 days passed. Using Venom's sensing abilities, Syd successfully evaded some trackers. This afternoon, Sunshine finally reached a critical point. Under the warm sunlight, Syd began his final practice. A prompt sounded. Ability, Sunshine, 0/1000, Level 3. The next second, Syd's body began to change. A familiar warmth appeared, rapidly transforming his body. Chapter 55. As the warm flow coursed through him, Syd felt his cells undergoing some changes. At this moment, Venom, who was in Syd's right hand, was startled. A sense of threat swept over him, making him instinctively crawl out of Syd's hand. The black liquid wriggled. What's happening? Syd's body. Just a moment ago, Venom felt Syd's body undergoing an inexplicable change, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. When the sense of threat subsided, Venom crawled back into Syd's right hand. Before he could ask what had happened, he immediately noticed a difference. A much more comfortable feeling washed over him, and Venom felt his weakened body, from splitting, rapidly recovering. Venom was stunned. "Syd, what happened to you?" he asked, confused. He felt more and more baffled by Syd. Everything about Syd was puzzling to him. Syd didn't answer him and instead began testing his abilities. As the light energy within him decreased, the sunlight within 75 meters slightly distorted. Syd frowned slightly, it only improved this much. Feeling a bit disappointed, he shook his head and consoled himself. Never mind, it's still pretty good, just enough. As his other abilities upgraded and his internal light energy increased, the range of Sunshine would also expand. Overall, it was sufficient. Besides the significant increase in the range of Sunshine, he also noticed changes in his internal light energy. Under the sunlight, Syd quietly waited for his internal light energy to recover. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Feeling the light energy within him, Syd roughly estimated. A level 3 ability can be used about 50 times, while level 2 can be used over 100 times. Overall, it was just enough. Of course, delving deeper, it was still insufficient. Sunshine has upgraded, so I can now focus on the unlock progress. Syd's eyes filled with anticipation. Whether it was the potential floating and flying ability or the possible changes upon reaching 100% mimicry, he was eagerly looking forward to it. Additionally, the more abilities awakened, the more light energy his body would have, creating a positive feedback loop. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. The energy points continuously increased. While Syd was collecting light energy, Venom was feeling suspicious. Earlier, he sensed the sunlight above him changing, thinking Syd was about to use that terrifying ability, causing him to shrink back into his hand. After waiting for a while without seeing the terrifying light appear, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was a bit puzzled. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but compared to last time, the distortion range of the sunlight seemed to have increased by 2 or 3 times. Was it just my imagination? Venom muttered. While he was puzzled, he saw Syd stop practicing his ability and turn to face the sunlight. Venom immediately guessed what Syd was doing. Is he absorbing sunlight to recover energy and stamina? In amazement, he watched as Syd remained motionless, basking in the sun for an entire afternoon. Seeing Syd's increasingly perplexing actions, Venom found humans more and more incomprehensible. Are all human behaviors this strange? Is it necessary to bask in the sun for an entire afternoon? Shouldn't he have already recovered his energy and stamina? As the sun completely set, Syd finally stopped sunbathing. He looked at the panel, focusing on the energy points section. Energy points, 5079. Seeing the 5000 plus energy points, Syd felt quite good. He glanced at the unlock progress. Unlock progress, 80%. Syd focused, allocating all his energy points to the unlock progress. In the next second, the unlock progress jumped. Unlock progress, 82%. It only increased by 2%. Syd shook his head. After a brief disappointment, he became excited again. Almost there, by tomorrow it should reach 85%. I wonder what ability I'll gain. And what changes will occur after reaching 100% mimicry, as well as the next mimicry target, Scarlet Witch. Chaos Magic. Thinking of Chaos Magic, his eyes lit up. It is one of the 3 ancient powers in Marvel, possessing the terrifying power to alter reality. Of course, that's only accurate when combined with Scarlet Witch's mutant ability to alter probabilities, making Chaos Magic truly formidable. Even the original owner of Chaos Magic didn't possess this power. In short, the abilities present in Scarlet Witch would keep him busy exploring for a long time. I just hope it doesn't involve the Dark God then. Syd frowned slightly. Chaos Magic has some ties to the Dark God then, and if he really mimicked it, who knows if it would attract Than's attention. If it did attract attention, that would be a big problem. That's an ancient god, not easy to deal with. After a while, Syd shook his head, deciding not to dwell on it. He couldn't abandon the unlock progress over a potential threat. Looking at the dim sky, Syd stepped away. Not long after he started walking, Venom in his right hand alerted him. Be careful. Syd frowned, immediately understanding that Venom had sensed trackers again. In recent days, he had noticed many people searching for him. Besides government agents, there were also others with ill intentions. Fortunately, Venom's sensing ability was quite advanced, especially regarding danger. Usually, those people hadn't spotted him before Venom sensed them in advance. Where are they? Syd asked. Behind the wall to your left, Venom replied. Syd moved quietly to the wall and listened. The voices of 2 middle-aged men faintly came from the other side. Damn, where is that kid? If it weren't for the money and the promise of a big reward upon finding him, I wouldn't be wasting my time on this stupid task. A burly man in a blue shirt, Dave, complained, that underground organization's mission is such a hassle. The other man in a white t-shirt responded, keep your voice down, will you? Do you want everyone to hear? If the target escapes because of you, I'll beat you up. Dave grumbled, what's the big deal? We haven't found him after all this time. No way we'll run into him now. You're overthinking. As they mumbled, Syd paused, stopping his plan to interrogate them. Underground organization. In an instant, he thought of the killed Carl Panna and the escaped speedster. Chapter 56. Not long ago, that guy escaped, probably to report back to his organization, which led to the current situation. Are they planning to cause trouble? Syd frowned, wondering where they got the nerve to come after him. Because of their leader? As he thought about it, Syd quickly left the area. Finding a secluded spot where he could bask in the moonlight, he reminded Venom to stay alert and then fell asleep. Photon energy +1. The night passed uneventfully, and soon it was the next day. It was still a sunny day, with the brilliant sun hanging high, casting its scorching rays. Under the sunlight, Syd was woken by the prompt in his mind. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. As he basked in the sun, he started feeling a bit aimless. After pondering for a while, he decided to study Venom. After a while, under Syd's control, a black suit covered his body. Glancing at the suit, he sighed in relief. Fortunately, it wasn't the kind of transformation where he turned into a venom monster covered in black liquid. Instead, it was a textured black suit, similar to a black-suited Spider-Man or Superman in his black suit, which he didn't mind. It's not bad. At least it can defend against ordinary bullets in a pinch. Syd evaluated. As for sniper rifles and armor-piercing rounds, he didn't hold much hope. Venom's strength wasn't in defense but in recovery. Hearing his evaluation, Venom was a bit dissatisfied. Syd, this is just okay? It's clearly the best. When we combine, we're invincible. Listening to Venom's boast, Syd's mouth twitched. You really haven't experienced the harshness of the world, not knowing what true strength is. There are plenty of terrifying beings on Earth. Syd shook his head. Even he didn't dare claim invincibility, and Venom really needed a reality check. Terrifying beings. Venom was confused, not knowing who these terrifying beings Syd mentioned were. And how did Syd seem to know so much? At this moment, Syd suddenly thought of something and asked, Venom, can you cure cancer? The cancer you humans talk about. Venom was slightly stunned, then laughed, of course, I can cure it. I can devour the cancer cells in your human body. It's simple for me. Syd's eyes lit up, and he immediately had an idea. However, after hesitating for a while, he couldn't bring himself to let Venom enter his vital organs. Thinking for a moment, he said, try devouring the cells in my right hand. Venom looked puzzled, not knowing what Syd was up to. The next second, he complied. Then, before Syd could feel excited, Venom suddenly cried out and quickly emerged from his right hand. At the same time, Syd felt a surge of sunshine energy release from his right arm. What's going on? Syd quickly controlled this power and looked at Venom. He was shocked. He noticed that Venom's body seemed to be missing some parts, with residual energy still corroding his tissues. Venom looked terrified and said, Syd, your body's cells. With Venom's explanation, Syd finally understood what had happened. When Venom attempted to devour the cells, as soon as he damaged the cell walls and membranes, a mysterious energy seeped out from the damaged cells. In Venom's perception, the light flashed. This power didn't affect Syd, but for Venom, it was almost like a deadly poison. If he had destroyed too many cells at once, he would have been severely harmed or even killed. Of course, Venom probably sensed something was wrong and stopped in time. Syd frowned. He hadn't expected his cells to be so unusual. It seems those transformations really changed my body's cells significantly. Shaking his head, he gave up on the idea of letting Venom devour his cancer cells. If ordinary cells were this dangerous, he couldn't imagine what the cancer cells had become. Perhaps they were like little monsters? Full who? Syd sighed, thinking, I can only continue to increase my photon energy to suppress them, or hope to acquire a new ability to deal with it. But who knows if the cancer will worsen and whether he can hold out until then. Syd shook his head, dismissing the thoughts, and turned his attention to the energy points. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. The sun rose higher and higher, reaching its zenith before slowly descending. As evening approached, Syd couldn't help but glance at the panel. Energy points, 10,903. Over 10,000 points, that should be enough. With anticipation in his eyes, the unlock progress flashed rapidly. Unlock progress, 86%. As the unlock progress reached 86%, a prompt sounded immediately. Ability, Flight, unlocked. Ability, Flight, 0/100, Level 1. Finally. Syd's mood instantly brightened. Flying. It's one of humanity's dreams. The invention of airplanes was driven by the desire to soar through the skies, and now he possessed this ability, not needing any tools to fly using his own body. Moreover, having the ability to fly would make a significantly different impression on others. Syd eagerly began to test it. Flight experience +1. With the thought, and under Venom's stunned gaze, his body slowly lifted off the ground. 10 centimeters off the ground, half a meter, 1 meter. His black-clad figure floated in the air, exuding an ethereal, mystical aura as the wind blew. From a distance, he seemed like the center of the universe, giving off an impression of being one with everything, almost godlike. His entire demeanor elevated significantly. He seemed divine. This feeling. Syd murmured. Under Venom's stunned gaze, his body slowly ascended. 2 meters. 10 meters. Syd felt inside. The energy consumption for flight was minimal, almost negligible, like a constant state. However, it might be due to the level restriction, but once he exceeded a range of about 10 meters, the photon energy consumption increased. It felt like he was truly using an ability that required energy. Besides these limitations, there was something else that surprised him. At this moment, a prompt kept echoing in his mind. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. The experience for flight was increasing at an exaggerated rate. Chapter 57. The prompts kept ringing. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. Syd was surprised. The speed at which experience was increasing was unexpectedly fast. Even just maintaining the flight state, experience kept increasing without the need for repetitive practice. Most importantly, in the flight state, the photon energy consumption was almost non-existent. This meant that, except for at night, Syd could stay in the flight state continuously, and the speed of experience increase would be unprecedentedly fast. Syd had a feeling that the flight ability might be the first to reach level 5, and it would be the easiest one to upgrade. The benefits brought by this were self-evident. The increase in photon energy alone from the flight upgrades was a huge gain. Especially when it reached level 5, the amount of photon energy it would bring would be unexpectedly high. Syd's eyes filled with anticipation. By then, both the range of sunshine and the endurance of other abilities would likely see a significant boost. Syd pondered, the upgrade direction of flight should be in terms of range and speed, right? From earlier, he felt that the flight speed was extremely slow, almost not even as fast as an average person running. There was also the 10-meter range limitation. Exceeding this range caused the flight's steady state to be lost, leading to a significant consumption of photon energy. It was clear that upgrades to flight should improve these aspects. Suddenly, as Syd was lost in thought, he noticed something strange around him. In the flight state, he vaguely heard ethereal music starting to play. Sacred, solemn, mysterious, ethereal. The music was familiar, reminiscent of the BGM that accompanied Orochi's appearance. As the ethereal sound played, the aura around him elevated even further. The feeling of being one with heaven and earth, one with all things grew stronger, making him seem godlike. However, the ethereal sound was very faint, barely audible, making this feeling reach a limit without being overwhelming. While he was surprised by his own changes, Venom was already stunned. Syd had inexplicably gained the ability to fly? He couldn't believe it. And this sound. The ethereal sound in his ears made Venom feel solemn, sacred, and mysterious. At the same time, there was an indistinct sense of tension, as if something had appeared, and the ethereal sound was welcoming it. After a while, he finally shook off the faint tension. Venom muttered, "Where is this sound coming from?" He couldn't figure out the source, it seemed to come from everywhere, as if from some unknown place. At this moment, Syd slowly lowered his altitude, descending from the sky to hover a foot above the ground. Flight experience +1. He looked up at the sky. It was already nearing evening, and after testing the flight ability, the sky had almost completely darkened. Unlock progress 86%. Glancing at the panel, Syd thought, I wonder what ability will awaken at 90%. Or at 95%. The energy points collected tomorrow should be enough to push the unlock progress to 90%. Syd's eyes filled with anticipation. While floating cross-legged in the air, Syd listened to the faint ethereal sound around him, grateful for the secluded location. Otherwise, the commotion might have been too much. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. While absorbing moonlight, Syd found that absorbing moonlight alone was enough to maintain the flight effect. 2.5 hours later, a prompt sounded in his mind. Ability, Flight, 0/500, Level 2. Taking advantage of the night, Syd immediately began to experiment. 1 meter. 10 meters. 50 meters. In the dark night, Syd looked up at the moon. 50 meters is the limit. Syd was a bit disappointed. Of course, he could still fly higher, but it would consume a lot of photon energy. Flight experience +1. Besides the range, he noticed that the slow speed of floating flight had improved. If it was slower than an average person running before, it now exceeded that. Finally, the speed is somewhat useful, Syd sighed. At least now, the flight speed was faster than his running speed. And this is only level 2. Syd was filled with anticipation. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. Nearly 3 hours later, Syd felt sleepy and had to come down from the air. Ability, Flight, 120/500, Level 2. While feeling sleepy, he had tried sleeping in the air but failed. He found that the floating flight state was controlled by thought, and falling asleep muddled his thoughts, making it easy to lose control of the flight, or even fly erratically. Syd shook his head and decided to give up. He instructed Venom to keep watch and then fell asleep. Time passed. The warm sunlight woke Syd up. Photon energy +1. As he woke up, Syd's body immediately floated into the air. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. His presence became more intimidating. Gradually, the ethereal sound that made one's scalp tingle appeared faintly. Venom, hidden in Syd's right hand, felt a renewed sense of fear despite hearing it more than once. By the afternoon, Syd stopped floating. Ability, Flight, 0/1000, Level 3. Syd quickly tested and found the range had increased to 200 meters. At the same time, the flight speed had significantly improved, more than twice as fast as a normal person's running speed. Although not extremely fast, it was much faster than an average person. Additionally, because the flight ability had reached level 3, his internal photon energy had increased dramatically. The usage count for level 3 abilities had risen to over 70 times. Flight upgrades quickly. If it reaches levels 4 and 5, the internal energy will likely increase even more. By then, the issue of lacking energy will be greatly alleviated. Furthermore, the range of sunshine had increased to about 82 meters. It had become even more formidable. At this moment, photon energy +1. Syd looked at the energy points. Energy points, 9,983. I wonder if I'll gain a new ability. Curious, Syd invested all his energy points into the unlock progress. The next second, the 86% unlock progress blurred. Unlock progress 89%. Syd frowned, stuck at 89%. He found that breaking through to the next level became increasingly difficult. While the early stages were easy, the later stages had him stuck at each percent for a long time. After thinking for a while, Syd shook his head and stopped pondering. End of chapter. Comment. 19 Comment. Vote. Chapter 58, Chapter 58. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. $4.5 www.patreon.com/Zalum. Check out my website. It has plus 3 extra chapters for free. ZalumTranslations.com. Given the speed at which photon energy is collected, this progress won't take long. By tomorrow, he should have gathered enough. Suddenly, Syd felt something and stopped. He looked into the distance. These people are really annoying. Standing on a tall building, he didn't even need Venom's reminder to see the people gradually approaching. Recently, he had encountered people looking for him more than once. I can sense their malice, Venom said with a grin. I want to bite off their heads. Syd's mouth twitched. He pushed Venom's head away, the long tongue hanging out, and turned his attention to the approaching pursuers. Being chased like this continuously wasn't an option, he needed to teach these people a lesson. Space transfer experience +1. Space transfer experience +1. His figure disappeared from the rooftop and reappeared below. In the distance, 4 burly men were looking around, searching for something. Syd quietly followed them, intending to find their hideout. An hour later, Syd followed the 4 men to a small house. From a distance, he could see the 4 men talking to someone inside the house. Space transfer experience +1. Syd quietly approached and stuck to the window. Observing, he saw 5 people inside, 4 men and 1 woman. He could faintly hear their conversation. The woman in green clothes spoke with disdain, "You guys are useless. You can't even find one person. We're reconsidering our cooperation with you. Among the 4 mercenaries, a short, stout middle-aged man frowned. You know this mutant is hard to find. If it were that easy, why would you need us? Ivy Ann sneered, about to say something, when the man beside her interrupted. Enough, Ivy Ann. The kid is indeed hard to find. Don't make it difficult for them. Seeing Anil shaking his head, Ivy Ann had to stop and change the subject. She laughed coldly. That little guy is good at hiding. Be thankful you didn't find him, or we'd have shown him the consequences of offending our underground organization. Before she could finish, she suddenly clutched her chest, her face showing disbelief. Dark particle experience +1. A fist-sized hole appeared in her chest, through which the scenery behind could be seen. The flesh and bones had completely disappeared. Bang, bang, bang. The dark particles continued, piercing several walls before dissipating. Ivy Ann howled in pain. Her face was full of terror and confusion. What happened? Before she could think more, she began vomiting blood and convulsing, rolling on the ground in agony. Blood flowed. Before passing out, she vaguely saw a figure in black clothing. It was him. Ivy Ann was stunned. In the end, her eyes fixed, the last emotions being terror, anger, and unwillingness. Seeing Ivy Ann die miserably, both the underground organization members and the 4 mercenaries were shocked. In unison, the 4 mercenaries drew their guns from their waists. Their eyes locked onto the mysterious figure slowly walking in through the front door. It's you. At a glance, they recognized who it was. Anger and shock followed. They hadn't done anything to this guy yet, and he had come to them, even killing someone? He wasn't taking them seriously at all. Reflective shield experience +1. The 4 mercenaries were the first to act, with 2 of them trying to fire their guns. Bang! Instantly, 2 screams echoed. The bullets hit an invisible shield in front of Syd and quickly bounced back. The other 2 mercenaries, wary, nearly dropped their guns in shock. This freak could indeed reflect bullets. They were glad they hadn't fired immediately. Syd ignored them and focused on the remaining 4 mutants. Space transfer experience +1. In the next moment, he appeared next to a young man. Divine finger experience +1. Dodge. Unfortunately, despite the shouts from the other 3, it was too late. Syd's finger had already touched the young man. Crack, bang. The sound of shattering glass was heard, and the young man was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into a nearby wall. The wall cracked, followed by the sound of bones breaking. The young man didn't even have time to scream before passing out. Syd was about to move on to the next target when he felt a sharp pain in his head, as if an invisible force was attacking his mind. A mental attack? His gaze instantly turned to a white-skinned, chubby man. Feeling stimulated, Syd's inner power surged uncontrollably, almost exploding. Venom suddenly emerged from his right hand, instantly forming a black mask over his head. Hey! My mental power! Bob was stunned, unable to believe that a mere black liquid could nullify his mental abilities. Syd, however, knew that Venom had exceptionally strong mental resistance. Whether it was magical illusions, dream attacks, or other mental assaults, Venom was almost immune. Syd wasn't surprised that Venom's mask could block mental attacks. What did surprise him was this guy's ability to bypass the reflective shield and use mental attacks. Spiritual light beam experience +1. A blue energy beam shot up from the ground without warning. In an instant, the chubby man screamed as his body exploded into a bloody mess, needing immediate censorship. Reflective shield experience +1. Dark particle experience +1. Dark particle experience +1. Spiritual light beam experience +1. Space transfer experience +1. Divine finger experience +1. Facing Syd's relentless attacks, Anil and the others felt despair. They couldn't comprehend how there could be such a powerful mutant. Compared to what was shown in the recent live broadcast, facing him in person was far more terrifying. Maybe, only with a much larger force could they hope to defeat him. As expected, facing Syd's barrage, they all fell in pools of blood. Our leader won't let you go. You can't escape. Syd didn't listen to their dying words and sent them away from this world. Chapter 59. After finishing everything, Syd slowly turned and left, leaving behind a room full of blood. On the way, Syd pondered whether he should check out that so-called underground organization. As the sun set, The events that had transpired here were quickly discovered. Members of the underground mutant organization and the mercenary organization gathered at the scene. Seeing the carnage inside the house, the 30 or so people present looked grim, some even bent over and vomited. It was definitely that kid. A tall, burly man in a black jacket with a fierce expression spat on the ground. Damn, he dares to kill our people. The leader of the underground mutant organization, Henrik, had a murderous glint in his eyes. At this moment, a nondescript man from the mercenary team stepped forward. Thomas glared angrily at the members of the underground organization, saying, "This is your fault. If you hadn't insisted on going after that kid, Andy and the others wouldn't have died so horribly." The mercenaries around him were equally upset. The 4 people who died were their comrades, those they had gone through life and death with many times. Now they were suddenly gone, and it was hard for anyone to accept. You. The underground mutant organization members showed anger. They accepted the task, and now they were being blamed for the deaths. Besides, their own people had died too. Henrik's face turned violent, and he coldly snorted. In the next second, Thomas, who was about to shout something, suddenly froze, instinctively looking down at his body. He saw that he was gradually becoming transparent, like a fading shadow. Thomas reached out, his mouth open. The next moment, a sound like shattering glass echoed. Thomas vanished into thin air, right in front of everyone. "Thomas! What's happening?" The mercenaries shouted in surprise. The underground mutant organization members wore smug expressions. They murmured among themselves. The leader's power is still as formidable as ever. So terrifying. Even though they had seen it many times, they couldn't help but feel awe and fear. The power to turn someone from solid to nothingness was truly frightening. The leader could do this to others and even himself. In a state of nothingness, no one could touch him. It was as if he was invincible. This was why they were so loyal to the leader and not afraid of that mutant kid. Compared to the kid, their leader was far more terrifying. As for the kid, he wouldn't stand a chance against the leader. The kid dared to offend their underground mutant organization repeatedly, he was seeking death. This time, the kid had thoroughly angered the leader. He was dead for sure. They were already imagining when the leader would go and slaughter the kid. At this moment, "You!" The mercenaries' faces changed as they raised their guns to aim at Henrik. But before they could do anything, their bodies also began to turn translucent. In the sunlight, they vanished instantly as if they had never existed. Henrik snorted coldly. "Great job, leader. These guys were dumb." The underground mutant organization members looked at Henrik with admiration. Then, a slim woman in a red dress, with a striking appearance, stepped forward and smiled, "Leader, when are we going to deal with that guy?" Henrik glanced at her and then his face darkened. "Now. I can't wait to kill that brat. How dare he offend our organization?" After a sarcastic remark, he continued, "But we can't go after him immediately. We need to find some allies." Allies? The members of the underground organization were puzzled. Henrik sneered, "There's a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." Even though he could kill the kid by himself, it would be easier with help. Half an hour later, he contacted a government department, proposing a collaboration. On the other end, there was initial apprehension, but after some consideration, they agreed. Just as Henrik had thought, they also believed that the enemy of their enemy was a friend. They decided to work together to get rid of the mutant who was a thorn in their side. The two sides discussed their plans for a while. During this time, the head of the 23rd Experimental Base, Alessandro, confidently arranged his forces. 100-strong armed team and 3 helicopters for aerial bombardment. Along with the mutants from the underground organization. Alessandro's lips curled into a confident smile. While they were planning, Syd was taking advantage of the evening to add the recently collected energy points to his unlock progress. Unlock progress 89%. Seeing no immediate change, Syd pouted. Flight experience +1. Flight experience +1. The sun rose and set, and soon it was the next dawn. On the roof of a 4-story building. Having just woken up, Syd sat on the edge of the rooftop, occasionally swinging his legs, showing no fear of falling. Photon energy +1. Photon energy +1. Energy points, 1101. Glancing at the energy points, Syd immediately added them to the unlock progress. Unlock progress 90%. Seeing the 90% progress, Syd frowned slightly, still nothing. He was a bit disappointed. Suddenly, he noticed something different. When flying, the ethereal sound around him became clearer, and his aura increased again. While he was surprised, the underground mutant organization and Alessandro had begun searching for him. An hour later, Irina, having received the news, immediately launched another live broadcast. The news quickly garnered widespread attention online. After all, it hadn't been long since the last time. Under the watchful eyes of many, Irina, dressed in a white dress, stood under the spotlight. Netizens started discussing. "Hey, why is there another live broadcast? What's happening?" Knowing people would be curious, Irina didn't waste time and got straight to the point. "Good morning, viewers. I'm your host, Irina." Irina smiled. "Today, I bring you good news. Soon, the relevant departments will launch a new operation, and this time, it will be different. That mutant boy who escaped last time won't be able to get away this time." Irina's confident expression and vow surprised the viewers. Can they really catch him? What's giving Irina such confidence? Is the government better prepared this time? Curious. Irina's words restored the viewers' confidence. They believed she wouldn't make baseless claims. Even last time, Irina hadn't been this confident. This indicated that this time, success was assured. At this moment, many people looked excited and expectant, eager to see the mutant boy's defeat and capture soon. As netizens buzzed with discussion, Logan and others, as well as members of the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants, were also reacting to the news. Chapter 60. In a dark alley. That kid. Logan frowned and threw away his cigar in frustration. Irina's unprecedentedly confident expression gave him a bad feeling. Not only him, but Chris and the others felt the same. What kind of huge force could make that woman so confident? A chill ran down their spines. They were unsure if Syd could escape this time. "Let's see if we can find him and help," Chris sighed. In the government department, a middle-aged man in official uniform suddenly had his blue eyes turn yellow. He was, in fact, Mystique. Raven frowned deeply, murmuring, "This is bad." Flipping through the paper files in her hand, worry filled her eyes. The information indicated that Alessandro, the head of the 23rd Experimental Base, had deployed over 100 armed soldiers for the capture operation. Additionally, the files showed that an underground mutant organization had joined in, especially highlighting the organization's leader. This leader had incredibly powerful abilities. He could turn people within a certain range into nothingness and could make himself intangible. Seeing this information, Mystique's worry deepened. The mutant kid was strong, but he was definitely not a match for this person. Let alone 100 soldiers. How could he resist? Mystique flipped through the files, feeling her heart race. The next moment, she took out her phone and urgently reported the situation to Eric. What? Even Eric was shocked upon seeing the information. 100-strong armed team? And scanning through several pages of the leader's information, Eric's eyes grew heavy. Even he wasn't confident he could defeat this person. It was almost like dealing with the Black King Sebastian Shaw back in the day, evoking a sense of despair. At that moment, he had already lost hope. He clearly remembered that the Sebastian Shaw had the ability to absorb and store any form of energy, including nuclear and kinetic energy from bullets. This made him almost invincible. Every attack only made him stronger. If it weren't for Charles using mental attacks after Eric removed Shaw's helmet, they wouldn't have been able to defeat him. And this Henrik was similarly invincible, possessing equally terrifying abilities. Perhaps only the legendary Omega-level mutants could defeat him? Broly. Eric sighed. If even he couldn't defeat Henrik, how could this young boy possibly stand a chance? He thought, soon, he would probably receive news of the boy's death. On the other side, Raven detected the fear and pessimism in Eric's voice. After a moment of silence, she hesitated before sending the information to the X-Men, hoping they could save the child. Wearing sunglasses, Scott, the white-haired Ororo, and the red-haired Jean. This is troublesome, Scott frowned deeply. Looking at the information Mystique sent, both Jean and Ororo, as well as Scott, felt a heavy weight. First, there were the 100 armed soldiers. How could the boy escape such a firepower siege? Surviving would already be a miracle. Not to mention, the leader of the underground mutant organization. Such a troublesome figure made all three of them deeply worried. They couldn't possibly deal with someone like that, could they? If the boy encountered him. Imagining the outcome, the three fell silent. With no other options, they passed the information to Professor X. Looking at the information, Charles frowned tightly. A figure comparable to Sebastian Shaw. If Eric hadn't suddenly removed Shaw's mental defense helmet, allowing him to use mental attacks, they might have been dead long ago. And this child was about to face someone comparable to Shaw? Professor X. Charles sighed, seeing no hope. Despite having no hope, both he and Eric sent people to try to save the child. Time passed quickly. At 11 o'clock in the morning, the bright golden sun disappeared, replaced by a gloomy sky. Who? Dark clouds covered the sky, and the damp wind howled, heralding an approaching storm. The sky grew dark. Syd sat on the edge of the rooftop, resting for a while. Just as he was about to leave, something in the distance caught his attention. At the same time, Venom's warning rang out. Be careful. From a distance, Syd saw people in black clothing approaching cautiously, seemingly surrounding him. He could faintly see guns being aimed. Reflective shield experience +1. He also noticed the presence of helicopters. Syd estimated there were at least dozens, maybe over 100 people. Each one was fully armed, equipped with various weapons. Syd frowned slightly. As they got closer, he spotted a tall, burly man in a black jacket making an obscene gesture at him. The burly man wore a vicious smile, shouting, "Kid, you're really here. You dared to offend my organization multiple times, you'll die miserably." Henrik sneered. Outside the soldiers' encirclement, members of the underground mutant organization, who hadn't entered the encirclement, looked on with anticipation. It's happening. Soon, the leader will show his power and make that brat disappear. Every time I think about the leader's power, it terrifies me. That kid will probably be crushed like an ant, right? The excitement wasn't limited to them. Although the operation was swift and covert, it couldn't hide the commotion from the encirclement. From a distance, many onlookers followed the soldiers, watching from afar. Listening closely, they could hear discussions. Are they finally going to catch that mutant fugitive? What a huge operation! He won't escape this time. Boom! Thunder rumbled overhead, dark clouds gathering, the atmosphere heavy. The damp wind howled. Syd sat on the rooftop edge, his black hooded cloak billowing in the wind. His face was obscured by the hood's shadow, making his expression unreadable. Inside the armed encirclement, Colonel Cage, leading the soldiers, smiled. This powerful mutant was about to die by his hands. The thought made him feel pleasure. Under the watchful eyes of many, no one thought the boy could escape. He was destined to die at the soldiers' hands. Seeing Colonel Cage preparing to act, Henrik sneered and approached quickly. Boom! On the fourth-floor rooftop. Under the dark clouds, the black cloak fluttered in the gloomy wind, as if the boy would be blown away at any moment. He moved. He stepped forward, slowly descending. Then, to everyone's shock, he began to walk in the air. Step by step. He walked through the air, then stopped. High above. The boy's golden eyes gazed at them quietly.
Thanks for listening.